Some Pokemon feel like they never even had a chance at competitive success, from the very moment of their existence. And I'm not talking about obvious examples like Beautyfly or Leedian. Of course, these Pokemon never had a chance, and just looking at them, you wouldn't expect them to be very good. Not every Pokemon is designed to be a top-tier competitive threat. But there are certain Pokemon that don't look particularly bad. They don't scream low tier just at a glance, but the reality is that they always have been bad, and even attempts to buff them have not helped very much. As if there was something fundamentally wrong with them in the beginning that meant they could never function competitively. Why don't we take a look at some Pokemon like this, with tragedy sealed into their fate from the moment they took their first breath. I think the most classic example of what I'm talking about is Luxray, a Gen 4 Pokemon that looks cool. This is a Pokemon that looks like it could achieve something. It looks like it could be an asset to me, and a help to me, but this is not the case. Luxray is terrible, and it has been a low-tier Pokemon since day one, unfortunately. Luxray is a mono-electric type, with a weird stat distribution. It has a very good attack stat of base 120. Its other stats are alright, with about 80 in its HP and defenses, but a middling speed stat of only 70. It's not the slowest thing on the planet, but it's pretty damn slow for what is clearly designed as an offensive Pokemon, an offensive physical attacker. Luxray has the ability Intimidate in Gen 4, which is a very good ability that lowers the enemy's attack by 1 stage on switch in. So that gives it a little bit of defensive merit and possibly more entry points, weakening the enemy, allowing it to hit the field safer. So that's alright, but there are many problems with Luxray. First of all, mono-electric is not the most fantastic defensive typing. It's okay neutrally with only 1 weakness to ground, but it has a very limited amount of resistances, and Luxray's stats are not good enough to make up for the lack of resistances, so Luxray is just not great defensively. And that relatively low 70 base speed is also a problem. Luxray is sort of in a middle point of not being that bulky and not being that fast, meaning it's difficult for it to achieve anything. It's hard for it to hit the field in many cases, and then it's hard to pose a threat with any initiative, since it's not fast enough to outrun most things. And the other problem is its offensive move pool. Luxray is an electric type physical attacker, and its only option for electric stab is Thunder Fang in Gen 4, which is a pretty bad attack. It only has 65 power. Electric types famously have poor physical attacking options. It's one of the detriments of being a physical electric type is no good moves a lot of the time. And Luxray embodies that to the greatest extent. I mean, Thunder Punch is the best of it in Gen 4, which is only 75 power. Thunder Fang is far worse. So often Luxray in Gen 4 just runs Thunderbolt, ignoring its high attack stat and just being a bit of a mixed attacker instead, because at least Thunderbolt has an impressive 95 power. So in Gen 4, the Pokemon is just sort of non-functional in a competitive context, largely because of that, because it doesn't have a good go-to physical stab option for its primary attacking stat. So clearly Luxray was a bit underpowered in Gen 4, so Gen 5 attempted to buff Luxray, and they gave it some good new stuff. Luxray received the new ability Guts, which is a great alternative to Intimidate, leaning more into the offensive capabilities of Luxray. Guts is a good ability that grants 1.5x attack if you are statist, and it also means that you ignore the negative effect of burn. Very good, and Luxray can self-inflict status with a Flame Orb or Toxic Orb to guarantee that it gets that Guts boost. Luxray also received a new electric physical stab option of Wild Charge, which is a cut above Thunder Fang, a 90 power electric type physical attack with recoil damage attached to it. 1/4 of the damage dealt is taken in recoil. So that's pretty good. That's an attempt to buff Luxray, but Luxray still ended up in the very low tier of PU in competitive singles, despite these buffs. And I'll tell you why. Wild Charge may be better than Thunderfang, but it's still a bad move. Taking recoil damage in Pokemon is generally not advisable unless you have no other option. And usually, the cost of the recoil is that the move has a high power, like Flare Blitz, which has 120 power. That's at least a worthy trade-off. You're dealing significant damage and taking a bit of damage yourself. But Wild Charge only has 90 power with recoil attached. 90 power is just a normal amount of power for most moves. I don't know why this move has such a significant cost just for dealing a normal amount of damage. So this still being Luxray's best option is bad. It's very bad. The fundamental issue of Luxray being a bit too slow is also remaining problematic. And the other thing is that an electric-type offensive Pokemon kind of can't really function if it doesn't have a way to hit ground types. This is a fundamental issue with many electric types. If you can't hit ground types, then you're just going to get destroyed by any ground type, and ground is one of the most popular types in any competitive format. The best Luxray has is Ice Fang, which is another Fang move with only 65 power. Other than that, Luxray has to rely on Hidden Power, which is a special attack and not very good, not very high damage on Luxray. So OU viability is out of the question with Landorus Therian, Gliscor, Gastrodon, Garchomp all running around, all out running and destroying Luxray in a single hit. There's no chance. But even every other tier has top tier ground types that just invalidate Luxray's entire existence immediately. Without coverage, and without even having good electric stab, what is Luxray to do? Luxray is not even asking for much here. Luxray wants the absolute basics of a Pokemon toolkit. It wants an attacking move of its primary type, and it wants some coverage to hit the type that is immune to its primary attacking type. These are basic needs. Luxray does not have this, and it has no other advantages to speak of to make up for the lack of this. At least like Regieleki, even though Regieleki has no move to hit ground types. It has advantages in other areas. It's the fastest thing of all time. It has the utility of Rapid Spin. It has very hard hitting electric type attacks. So yes, Regieleki is limited in its coverage, but it has advantages in other areas to balance that out. Luxray has no coverage, it doesn't even have an electric type attack, and it doesn't have anything else to speak of. They didn't give this guy anything, damn it. How could you? And after the world's slightest buff in Gen 5 for Luxray, they said, that's it, that's a wrap. Luxray is getting nothing for years. The door has closed on Luxray's future, and we are going to neglect it moving forward. In Gen 6 and 7, Luxray received nothing. In Gen 8, Luxray received nothing. And in Gen 9, they gave Luxray one new thing. A single new thing. They gave it the move Supercell Slam, which is actually a good physical electric type attack. Finally. It has a 100 power, 95 accuracy, but unfortunately this also has a drawback, which is just a cosmic joke, I think. If you miss, you will take half of your HP, so there's a 5% chance you get screwed. But hey, at least this is a step above Thunderfang and Wild Charge, which just stink completely. Supercell Slam, at least. Most of the time has no drawback. Wild Charge has a drawback every time, for goodness sake. But they still haven't given Luxray any coverage to hit the most important thing, the ground type. The best it can do is click Facade, which is boosted by Guts, for normal type neutral damage against a ground type, which probably is not going to KO much of the time. And this has been its only option in that scenario for years. Luxray is still effing about with Ice Fang, and plenty of Pokemon in Gen 9 received the new move Ice Spinner. You could have given Ice Spinner to Luxray, I think, and that could have been fine. Maybe Triple Axle also. Plenty of Pokemon got Triple Axle. The only new move Luxray got that hits ground type is Trailblaze, which is a 50 power grass type attack that raises speed. I suppose you could work with this, but the power is not enough to actually deal enough damage to the ground types. The speed could be good to make up for one of your worst traits, your below average speed, but no, I don't think that's going to do very much. And by the way, I think even if Luxray did receive Ice Spin or Triple Axle, or a water type attack or something like that, it would still stink, because it's far too late for this. You had to do this long ago. Luxray was begging for anything years ago, and now you give it Supercell Slam. Far too late, and the power level has risen too much. I mean, if base 70 speed didn't cut it back in Gen 4, what hope does Luxray have in Gen 9? And yes, this guy can Terra now and use Terra Blast, but what a waste of your Terra on a Pokemon that frankly isn't worth running to begin with, even in Gen 9 ZU. I mean, in Gen 9 ZU you have Electivire, who is not a great Pokemon either, suffers from many of the same problems, but at least Electivire is faster. It's pretty fast for ZU with 95 speed, it has a higher attack stat, it has way more coverage, I think it has a better ability too. Suppose that's arguable, but motor drive for electric immunity, probably more useful than guts, probably more practical. I think even the eel has more to it than Luxray and Gen 9 ZU. At least it has levitate, a good ability. At least it's got coverage options. It's not great either, but Luxray seriously has nothing to offer. It's very unfortunate. And I think it's the result of strange design choices from the beginning, not giving it basic options that any Pokemon needs to survive. And I don't think there's any real reason to even limit Luxray in this way. It's not as if its lack of a good attack or coverage was balanced out by some other advantage it has in another area. It just sort of has this drawback without any compensation for it. They're kicking this guy while he's down, and I won't stand for it. I think it's an injustice. I think it's a real injustice. And I also think it's too late for Luxray. I think this stat line just can never work again in Pokemon. It's not good enough anymore. Even if they finally give Luxray good attacks, I don't see it being a good Pokemon ever. Unfortunately, Luxray was doomed from the start, and it is doomed for eternity. And the worst part is that he never even asked to be born in the first place. Up next is the unfortunate Arbok. A Pokemon with an imposing appearance. I would avoid Arbok if I saw it in the real world, for fear of my life. But in reality, I wouldn't have much to worry about. Turns out that I could probably take Arbok in a 1 versus 1, given its terrible competitive track record. Arbok is a Gen 1 Pokemon, and in the very first generation, Arbok was absolutely atrocious. One of the worst Pokemon in the whole game. Arbok has unimpressive stats, the worst possible typing at the time of Mono Poison, which is just weak to ground, and Psychic with no upside whatsoever because there aren't even any Poison type attacks, and nobody uses Toxic, so being a Poison type is just dreadful. And I suppose Arbok can paralyze things with Glare, if it's lucky, but it's got a tough existence. There is no doubt about that. Now, by Gen 3, Arbok had a bit more to show for itself. Poison was no longer that terrible. A poison typing at least meant that you were immune to being poisoned, which is more relevant now, and fighting resistance is more relevant now. And they gave Arbok 2 new abilities, both of which are pretty good. Shed Skin, very thematically appropriate on a snake, and it gives Arbok a 33% chance to cure its status at the end of each turn, a good ability. And then Intimidate as well, to lower the enemy's attack on switch-it, the same ability Luxray has. Can't go too wrong with Intimidate, always a pretty good one. But unfortunately none of that was enough to help Arbok very much. It's ranked in the very low PU tier, I think largely due to the fact that its stats are just not very good. Even for the lower power level of Gen 3, Arbok does not thrive in any area stat-wise. It doesn't even have the benefit of a 120 attack stat like Luxray does. That would be Christmas morning for a fellow like Arbok. All of these stats are bad. It's not bulky, it doesn't do any damage, and it's not fast. I don't know about you, but I don't look at Arbok and think that these stats reflect the visual. I think Arbok should have perhaps some more offensive stats, something. Snakes have a fast reaction time, don't they? They can escape quickly. Give it some speed. I don't know. Help Arbok. He doesn't do anything, for goodness sake. You haven't given him any stats. But he doesn't look like a weakling. He doesn't look like Beautyfly. I can understand Beautyfly having average stats and not doing anything. It's a little butterfly. But this is a big snake with an angry face. He looks like he could kill me, but he could not. I could easily kill him. I could easily defeat him in a duel. It wouldn't even be close. This guy has a measly 69 defense stat. Now, by Gen 5, Arbok received some new stuff. They gave Arbok some buffs. The new option Gunk Shot was introduced in Gen 4. And although this is an inaccurate attack with only 70% accuracy, it does have a high power. And if you're using a Pokemon like Arbok, I think it's better to gamble on a higher power than to use a more consistent attack and just not deal enough damage. You're better off gambling to attempt to deal higher damage, frankly. And in Gen 5, they also gave Arbok a pretty cool new option. The boosting move Coil, which is a good boosting move. It grants +1 attack, defense, and accuracy. So Coil actually synergizes with Gunk Shot, improving your accuracy as well, allowing Gunk Shot to hit more consistently. So that actually does synergize. Arbok in Gen 5 was also granted Sucker Punch for some priority, and Sucker Punch is a very good attack and a good form of priority here, especially because it helps you out against Psychic types, which hit you super effectively. Sucker Punch has 80 power to Dark type physical attack that has priority if the enemy is attacking you on that turn. Great move. These are some actual good new tools. Unfortunately, Arbok did not get a very good new ability in Gen 5. Heaps of Pokemon got new hidden abilities in Gen 5. Arbok's was Unnerve, which is just not very good. It prevents the opposing Pokemon from eating berries. That's not going to help you very much, Arbok, whether or not your opponent eats a Michael berry. That's not going to have a high impact on the battle, Arbok. Not very strategic of you. So Intimidate is far better, or perhaps Shed Skin for a setup set. But probably Intimidate because it has an immediate and tangible impact on the battle. Some things never change. Still though, all these buffs considered, Arbok still doesn't have any stats. So you can give it all these great new options and new moves, but it's still going to be outcompeted by many other Pokemon that have more advantages. And in Gen 9, the best thing they gave Arbok was Knock Off. This is the best new thing it has. Which is a great attack, don't get me wrong, but not quite enough to make up for all the devastating tragedies in Arbok's life. Gen 6, 7, and 8 were nothing for Arbok. It got literally nothing, I think. And in Gen 8, it wasn't even in the game. Arbok is now paling in comparison to some of its Gen 1 poison contemporaries, Muck and Wheezing. Wheezing has always at least had Levitate, which is a great ability, and its high defense stat, giving it some merit in earlier gens. And in modern gens, it has Neutralizing Gas, which is fantastic actually, disabling all abilities on the field. A great ability right there. Galarian Wheezing in particular is actually OU ranked in Gen 9. And Muck actually has a bit of merit on stall teams because of its ability Sticky Hold, which means it can't have its item removed. With Sticky Hold, it can always carry the boots and always dodge hazards, and operate pretty well as a wall because it has decent defensive stats unlike Arbok. Muck also has an alternate Alolan form, which has its merit too, with poison spreading and stab knockoff and a good defensive typing. Arbok did not get a regional form. Arbok did not get any noteworthy buffs over the years, and Arbok is unfortunately never going to be good. I'm declaring this right now. Arbok will never be good. They will never make Mega Arbok. They will never help Arbok. Arbok has been asking for help for longer than I have been alive. And they have not granted him any help. They've forgotten him. Maybe it's because Arbok is a snake and snakes are associated with deception, so Game Freak does not want to have any dealings with a snake Pokemon or give it any advantages, lest they be seen as engaging in some underhanded criminal activity. But Arbok has never done anything nefarious. Just because it's a snake doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. What has Arbok done to you? Probably nothing, because it switches in and dies in 2 seconds. Maybe it's clicked Glare, but Glare probably missed, because Glare has 75 accuracy in early generations. Up next we have a legendary that I'm sure you're all familiar with, Regigigas. And this is a Pokemon whose death warrant was signed as soon as they created its ability. If you ignore this guy's ability, it seems like an amazing Pokemon, of course. It's a legendary after all. It has fantastic stats. 110 in its HP defense and special defense, which is amazing bulk. 100 speed, which is really good. And a 160 base attack. These are elite stats right here. Unfortunately, its ability is Slow Start. One of the worst abilities ever. It's designed as an active drawback. This ability has the effect of, on switch in, halving the attack and speed of Regigigas for 5 turns. So your attack and speed stats are going to be pure garbage unless you sit there and stall for 5 turns. Then you will have legendary level stats, but it takes 5 turns to get there. And what's really terrible about this is that even if you manage to get through the 5 turns and disable the slow start effect, if you switch out and back in, you have to do it all over again. It's not persistent. You don't get rid of it permanently. That slow start is in effect once again as soon as you switch it back into the field, which is just a serious death sentence. There's no way Regigigas can function in competitive singles with an ability like this. 5 turns is so much time. To be a dysfunctional Pokemon for 5 entire turns is just not acceptable. Not to mention that a simple boosting move would have a similar effect. Just using Dragon Dance increases your attack and speed, so you could just be a worse Pokemon stat-wise than Regigigas and utilize Dragon Dance, and in 1 turn you have way higher attack and speed. To wait 5 turns for a higher attack and speed is just ludicrous. Now, Regigigas can be used just ignoring its attack and speed completely. Just use it as a wall. After all, its defensive stats don't get affected by slow start, and its defensive stats are decent. It's a normal type. But unfortunately, Regigigas does not have the greatest defensive or utility move pool in the world. It has Thunder Wave, which is good, but it doesn't have a good healing move. It doesn't have entry hazards. It doesn't have much at all, really. In Gen 4, it's getting destroyed by Pokemon like Clefable and Blissey in this role, and that remains the case in every generation, I think. There's just always better utility defensive Pokemon than Regigigas. And as a physical threat, the drawback of needing 5 turns to simply have a stat is far too much of a detriment. You can sit there and stall with Thunder Wave and Substitute, but the likelihood of that working out is so low. And even once you get there, was it worth the 5-turn investment? Usually not. Usually it was not. So it doesn't even matter what they give Regigigas, how they try to buff it. The only way to really buff this would be to reduce the drawback of this ability or give it a different ability, in my mind. Because if it has this ability, it's going to be garbage no matter what. And it has received some new moves like Knock Off and Body Press, which are good in later generations, but like I said, that's not going to be enough to help this regrettable Pokemon. Regigigas is actually very similar to the Pokemon Slacking, who also has fantastic stats, but a drawback built into its ability. And Slacking has the ability Truant, which means that on every other turn it cannot act. But Slacking, I think, is even better than Regigigas, because at least it can act immediately. It's not crippled and unable to attack anything for 5 turns. At least on the first turn, it can click Giga Impact or something and do a bunch of damage and then switch out. Slacking has actual viability in Gen 3 OU for its overwhelming breaking power. You just have to hit and run with it, attack and then exit, and bring it in when you can't be abused by effects like Protect and Substitute. But you can work with Slacking, and Slacking can work in some contexts, but Regigigas just cannot work in any context, unfortunately. Except doubles battles, where you can pair Regigigas with Weezing to disable its ability. Then it has the good stats, and then it can function. That's the only time Regigigas is any good. And I think that has some merit in doubles. But in singles, Regigigas is cursed and doomed to never achieve anything, unfortunately. I would at least give them respect for attempting to design a cool effect. It's flavorful. It's like an old mech automaton from the past with moss growing on it, and it needs time to achieve its full power. It's flavorful, and at least it has a drawback with some advantages if you get over the drawback. It's not like a Luxray where there's a drawback and no balance, no counterbalance to the drawback. But in this case, the drawback is too much. It's too much of a negative, and the Pokemon cannot overcome it for viability. Up next is Beheeyem. This is a Pokemon that I always forget exists. But he does exist. Everybody acknowledge his existence right now. Beheeyem is real. There is evidence. And this is not a Pokemon that I think they wanted to be garbage. They gave it some stuff. First of all, it looks like an ancient psychic rune with untold power. Looks like an ancient relic from a lost empire or something. Visually looks powerful. And its stats indicate some power. It has an impressive 125 base special attack, which is very good. It also has acceptable special defense, 95, with HP being 75, and a decent 75 defense stat as well. Its bulk is okay. Now, it has a very low speed of 40, but it's clearly a bulky attacker. It's designed to be such. And Beheeyem also has the ability Analytic, which also fits with the bulky attacker design. Analytic grants 1.3x power if your move was executed last in a turn. It's good for slow Pokemon. It also works if the enemy switches. And it's a good offensive ability. It's a good one. Unfortunately though, Beheeyem was ranked in the very low PU tier, even in its debut game of Gen 5. How unfortunate. What's wrong with Beheeyem in this generation? It doesn't seem that bad, does it? Well, any place in OU was certainly out of the question for Beheeyem when you have the competition of Reuniclus, who is a far superior psychic-type bulky special attacker with the incredible ability Magic Guard, a better move pool, and better stats. Reuniclus is destroying Beheeyem in every way, so that's unfortunate to be outclassed by another Gen 5 contemporary. But even in the lower tiers and the mid tiers, Beheeyem has its struggles. It's not that bulky, so it is prone to difficulty switching into the field. It is prone to being pursuit trapped. That is still a problem in this generation, remember? Pursuit still existed all the way up until Gen 7. And Behem, unfortunately, doesn't have great options to hit pursuit trap, as it has signal beam, which does hit the dark type. That could possibly help you, but it's a bit of a weak attack, and you can't always rely on hitting those pursuit trappers as they come in. They could pivot in, and then what the hell do you do? So Behem is very, very prone to being pursuit trapped. Its defense is not the greatest either. And the Psychic type is beginning to feel much weaker in Gen 5 too. U-turn has been on the rise as an option since Gen 4, a popular bug type attack that is simply used for pivoting that threatens Psychic type super effectively. That's always a detriment to being a Psychic type. They are vulnerable to pursuit. And I think to function as a bulky Psychic type at this point in the series, you need something excellent. You need more than this. Like Reuniclus, who has Magic Guard, literal immunity to sand and spikes and stealth rock and poison, immunity to most of the damn game. That certainly makes up for an otherwise poor defensive typing. Latius has great stats and the excellent ability Levitate, which help it significantly. Behem does not have enough. These stats are not making up for the detriments of the Psychic typing to enough of an extent. And the problems of being a Psychic type got worse and worse in the future with the addition of Knockoff to the game in Gen 6, a new Dark type attack that was the go-to physical option for many more Pokemon. A death sentence for bulky Psychic types everywhere, and not only did the sheer power of that move lead to the rise of Dark types in competitive, but also the fact that Steel no longer resists Dark or Ghost from Gen 6 onwards was a big downside for the Psychic type, meaning that those two types rose in general, and Psychic was weak to those two types. Being a Psychic type just kind of stinks. It's one of the worst types in the game in modern Pokemon. And Behem did not get any noteworthy buffs until Gen 8. That's a long time to wait for some simple buffs. But at least in Gen 8, Behem received the new option of Future Sight, which is a very good new option to get. It has a 120 power, it's a special attack, and it hits 2 turns after being used. It's actually a great attack that allows you to really apply pressure to the opponent, because that Future Sight attack will happen simultaneously on another turn while you also get to act. It sort of forces the enemy to bring in a Psychic resistance or immunity, which then allows you to predict what they're going to do, sometimes creating these checkmate situations where you will always have something good happen. Future Sight is commonly used on a lot of Pokemon like Galarian Slowking and Iron Crown in Gen 9. It's a great attack and a good new option for Behem. And Behem also got the new and improved Teleport, which was buffed in Gen 8 to allow you to switch out with a negative priority. And this actually combos pretty well with Future Sight. You can Future Sight and then teleport out to pivot and always move last and be in a position where that Future Sight is about to strike and you're doing well for yourself. And Behem can achieve some pretty good breaking power with this, but unfortunately, the guy is ranked ZU in Gen 8, despite these buffs. Because of course, there's significant competition. You're competing with the previously mentioned Galarian Slowking, who only has slightly less special attack, but far better bulk, and the ability Regenerator, which actually gives it good longevity, plus a better defensive typing of Poison Psychic. Even with these buffs that do fit Behem's initial design and concept, the most fundamental problem, which is just that Behem is a Psychic type, and it doesn't have any good defensive qualities to make up for that, is not being addressed. And Behem will never be good again unless you address this. You could say it was doomed from the start with a typing that would go on to continue being poor for its archetype. The cracks were already starting to form for this typing when this fella came out in Gen 5, perhaps in the ancient civilization where Behem once reigned supreme. It was a being of untold power, but now in the modern age it is crumbling and falling apart under the weight, the heavy weight of its age, and all that it has lost. How terrible. Plus this guy's not even in Gen 9, by the way. Up next is Alolan Dugtrio, an exciting new regional variant for Dugtrio introduced in Gen 7. And one of the weirdest Pokemon ever, I think, all around. This is Dugtrio with hair. It became a ground steel type. I guess its hair is made of solid metal. And the whole design of this guy is just strange. Dugtrio, the original, is of course known for its powerful ability Arena Trap, which is game-breaking and competitive. It traps non-grounded opponents on the field and allows ridiculous optimization of competitive gameplay, where you can trap specific things, enabling a indestructible stall team. Arena Trap is banned in every generation of competitive except Gen 3. But Alolan Dugtrio does not have Arena Trap. Instead, it has a new ability called Tangling Hair. Tangling Hair, very thematically appropriate, means that if a Pokemon makes contact with Alolan Dugtrio, it has its speed lowered by 1 stage. Alright, that's great. Lowering speed by 1 stage. I mean, first of all, Alolan Dugtrio is already pretty fast, with 110 base speed, so it would seem to be a physical attacker that is trying to be as fast as possible. It is a 100 base attack, 110 speed, and pretty bad bulk, especially that very low HP of 35, so switching in and tanking a hit is not exactly in the cards for Dugtrio much of the time here. Plus, it's aiming to be faster than most things anyway. So that's sort of strange. And also, its attack isn't even that high. It only has 100 base attack. So I don't really know what's going on with this guy. It's clearly far worse than Excadrill, who is right there and is way better. It has a higher attack. It somehow functions better defensively. It has rapid spin for support. That was never even a contest, of course, but Alolan Dugtrio is compelling in comparison to most things in existence. It's ranked PU in Gen 7. And it's kind of weird because it's a regional variant of a Pokemon that was genuinely game-breakingly powerful. So they could have made it good. There could be an alternate world where this is a good Pokemon and that wouldn't be too weird. Instead, they gave us this strange creature, this affront to nature, with a hair-themed ability that lowers speed on contact, which seems to be a defensive ability, kind of, that would enhance a slower Pokemon. Because a slower Pokemon with bulk could tank a hit and then apply this effect on contact and then outrun the enemy, perhaps. That could work, but Dugtrio doesn't have any good defensive stats, so Tangling Hair just doesn't seem that useful on it. And the result is a Pokemon that just fundamentally feels at odds with its own existence, doesn't do anything distinct, and kind of just sucks. Which is a little unfortunate, I suppose, for a new Dugtrio form that could have been good. But at least after this experience, they learned their lesson, and they realized that if they're making a regional form of Dugtrio, they've got to do it right next time. And they would never make a frail, weird version of Dugtrio with an ability centered around taking a hit for an advantage. They would never do that again, and to do that again would be completely stupid. So at least there's that silver lining, that they learned a valuable lesson about game design after this experience. So anyway, in Gen 9, they've added Wugtrio, who, if you're stupid, if you're an idiot, would seem very similar to Dugtrio. It has the same stats as Dugtrio. Its name is also the same as Dugtrio, except with a W at the beginning instead of a D. But this is a creature that is completely distinct from Dugtrio. This is a convergent species that evolved with similar traits to Dugtrio. It is actually a completely unique individual with no connection whatsoever to Dugtrio. Anyway, Wugtrio is a water type, and Wugtrio also has the very unique ability Gooey, and you're not going to believe what this ability does. It's very, very unique for a Dugtrio-inspired regional form. If you make contact with Wugtrio here, you actually have your speed lowered by 1 stage. Now that is novel right there. That's interesting. They went and they did it again, the idiots. What have they done here? They made a bad Dugtrio variant with the same ability. And it stinks, obviously. It's one of the worst Pokemon in Gen 9. It might be the worst Pokemon in Gen 9, actually. It's not even good in the lowest tier. It's just a bad, fast physical attacker that can't take a hit because it has no bulk and dies in 1 second. And it's got an ability that is designed around taking a hit to lower the enemy's speed, but its speed is already 120, which is pretty fast. Oh dear. Wugtrio never had a chance. Wugtrio never had a chance, and it is doomed for eternity, I'm afraid. Wugtrio will be banished to a place that you cannot return from, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, Wugtrio. You also did not ask to be born in the first place, but the one who created you has cursed you to a terrible fate, and you are doomed for all eternity, I'm afraid. I'm sorry, I'm not the one who did it. It wasn't me. But there's no hope for you, Wugtrio. There's no way that in Gen 10 they will buff Wugtrio. There's just no way. Anyway, folks, that does it for my video about a doomed Pokemon. Bit of a downer of a video, I apologize. These Pokemon didn't do anything wrong necessarily. They were just given nothing, and they are suffering the unfortunate consequences of that. Life is unfair, folks, and that is the moral of today's video. Sometimes a Pokemon like Pelipper, who is pure garbage, gets Drizzle and is buffed astronomically. Sometimes you are Luxray, and they give you Unnerve to prevent the enemy from eating berries, and then they say that that's enough for you for the rest of your life. You get to prevent berry eating, and that's all you get, Luxray. And to ask for more would be selfish of you. Did I miss any examples of Pokemon that were doomed from the very moment of their existence? Let me know down below in the comments, folks, and thank you for watching.